Hi, welcome to episode 77 of the American Tributaries podcast, where to break out of the bubbles we all live in, we're using modern technology to explore the various currents of people in our great country, kind of like a 21st century Lewis and Clark journey. I'm your host, Michael Whitten, here in Brooklyn, New York, and thank you for joining me in this exploration of America. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Vishwesh Bhatt, who lives about 950 miles southeast of me in Oxford, Mississippi, where he is executive chef at Snackbar, a renowned southern brasserie and oyster bar, and where he's received lots of acclaim. In 2022, he published this mouth-watering book called I Am From Here, which has received acclaim from Garden and Gun magazine, from NPR, from the James Beard Foundation, and I'm sure many other publishers and people in the culinary arts. So, Fishworth, thanks so much for joining me today. How are you doing? And could you share a bit of your story?
Hi, Michael. Thanks for having me. I don't know where to start. I was born and raised in Ahmedabad, India, in western state of Gujarat. Um, Came here as a teenager after I finished high school. Came to the U.S. Lived in Texas briefly, then Kentucky for a little bit, and then Mississippi with a couple of little jaunts. One to Miami and one to Denver, and then back to Mississippi. So I've been in Mississippi as long as I can remember, longer than anywhere else I've been. So this is home.
Uh-huh. Well, so I guess what brought you. I guess what brought you out of India, and what brought you to the United States amongst any places you could have gone.
Well, I mean, it wasn't a choice. I moved because my parents moved. One of those stories. My father,
Hmm.
now retired, but he was a research scientist and went to the University of. He went to was doing projects with some folks and ended up at the University of Texas, working there, and then similarly to Kentucky, and then down south.
Oh wow, okay. And what was it like for you? I mean, so how old were you when you moved here?
I think I had just I was 18, a little bit more than
Okay.
18. Yeah, I just finished high school.
Okay. And I guess way back then, was the food scene already on your radar, or how did that happen?
No, I didn't. I mean, I didn't have a food scene on my radar. I'd grown up in a household that was vegetarian. We were vegetarian when we moved here. Luckily for us, we moved to Texas, and so when we went to the grocery store, there were a lot of items that I immediately recognized.
Mhm.
Beans and tortillas and rice. All of that stuff looked very familiar. Chilies, all that stuff is things that I had grown up with and was familiar with, and it made the transition easier.
Mhm. I mean, Texas is not exactly a vegetarian state, though.
It's not, but there are plenty of vegetables. There were plenty of vegetables available. That's the beauty of
Yeah.
the South. That was sort of probably if we had moved to Ohio or say your neck of the woods, things might have been
Mhm.
a little different.
Yeah. So, and when did you start like getting into cooking and stuff?
I mean, I started cooking at pretty early age. I mean, was the youngest in a large family. I mean, our nuclear family is pretty small. It's just, it was mom and dad and my sister and I. But a large extended family. My father was the oldest of, is the oldest of 12 siblings. My mother was the oldest of 8. And so we had lots of aunts and uncles and cousins and all just, always coming through the house. And so there were always a lot of guests at our dinner table.
Mhm.
And I was the youngest, and so I would come home the earliest from school and be in mom's way while she was trying to get all this stuff ready. And so she would to basically to keep me occupied, give me tasks. And those tasks then turned into more difficult tasks, and I realized that the quicker I did what she asked me to do, the quicker I got to eat. Uh, and so, unbeknownst to me, I was learning how to cook. At least some basic skills, which I will tell you came in very handy. Uh, you know, 2 decades later, when I was a little lost, and I realized that the graduate school subject I was in was no longer of interest, and as a 20 mid 20s something year old, having sort of that. crises, and stress and all that, wondering what to do. I still had to pay bills, so I went and applied for a restaurant job, and realized that I could do that job, and that was because I had learned some skills when I was young.
Wow. So what? How far? What were you studying?
I was studying public administration. I wanted to be a bureaucrat. I thought that would be the greatest job on the planet.
Hmm. And what led you to have a change of feeling about that?
Yeah, I went and did an externship with a department that shall remain unnamed.
Uh,
But if you remember, back when we were growing up, you had these long Manila envelopes with little boxes on them, right? When interdepartmental memos, and you had to go from what somebody would sign off on it, and you take that to some other department, and they would you had this list of signatures on the outside. And I spent about 3 months running these memos back and forth from one department to the other, and never saw anything get done other than just somebody signing off on something and pushing it off to somebody else. And I quickly realized that what I had signed up for was not all that it was cracked up to be.
uh,
And
okay. So you're late 20s, and you're thinking of what else to do. Was the that job, or the getting involved in restaurants, was that the first thing you did, or did you look at other possibilities as well?
No, I didn't know what other possibility, because I mean, I had studied in college. I'd studied biology and political science, and this was while the Soviet Union was still around,
Yep. Yeah.
and I graduated, and then Mr. Gorbachev decided, well, it's okay if the Soviet Union didn't exist, and sort of the bipolar world that we had grown up in, and that I had studied and been ready for all my life, no longer existed. And
Yeah.
so all
Yeah.
the and all the jobs that went along with it had sort of just kind of evaporated, and I didn't really know what else to do.
Mhm.
I wasn't really trained for any I didn't have any technical skills or anything like that. Not many language skills either, so there was none of that that was possible.
Mhm. Oh, so you were like looking to like work in the State Department or something like that with?
Yeah. I mean, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it's
Yeah.
State Department or something similar, be
Yeah.
some sort of a bureaucrat who would, my this whole dream of mine was that I can make, I can change things, make things better. Like, don't we all have that at some point in our lives?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you have, I think, in a different, unexpectedly different way, I imagine.
Yes. Yeah, and
Uh,
it's been great.
so when you first got to Texas, like, was it an easy adjustment, a hard adjustment?
It was a combination. I mean, well, the weather was great, right? I mean,
Mhm,
I
mhm,
coming from Western India to Austin, Texas, in September, I
mhm.
believe it was. So it was hot and humid. Like, oh yeah, I know what this feels like. And as I said, the food looked familiar, at least on the surface of it. Um, what was difficult was also, I mean, again, remember Austin. This is early '80s. Was not what it is now. It was still a nice small town where uh, dominated by the university, and then you could get around, but also was very diverse, and there were lots of folks, Hispanic folks, and so people that looked like me, at least on the outside.
Mhm.
So that part of the transition was not very difficult. But the Texas part of Texas was hard, right? I mean,
Mhm.
just the way people thought of Texas and how important Texas was in all things, and and most of these people had never left the state. So to me, that was like, okay, I just came 10,000 miles, and there's another world out there that thinks differently than you do.
Yeah. It's a
That
huge
aspect,
state.
yeah,
It's a huge state, right?
yeah. But that was that was the part that was took a while to get used to.
Yeah.
And the wide open spaces, right? Growing up in India, there are open spaces, but nothing like Texas.
Yeah. The is the way I get one of the things that's kind of led me to do this podcast is to kind of, I guess, really try to step foot in other areas of the country. And like New York, you get used to a certain kind of way of living, a certain perspective, but then like when I've talk to people, and even like in Texas or where you are, or got almost anywhere else, like in the middle of the country, you realize how far people are from things. Like, so like there
Right.
are people, and the thing that's close, it might be the big city might be a place of 10,000 or 20,000 people.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I think
Absolutely.
like, and like when you look at Texas, it's just like, oh, Texas is a state. But then like when you actually, when I try to put my mind into a place like that, it's like,
Hmm.
you're in the middle, there's no water, there's no like huge ocean for like, 10, 20 hours of driving, or it seems like
Right.
it.
So yeah, it's a
So,
long way.
so I,
Yes.
I think in some respects, like when I think about how people can kind of be limited in how they see things, it can be a little bit like surprising. But then on the other hand, like living in New York City, a lot of people don't ever leave New York City, and
Same.
we're
Yeah.
lucky because we have 7, 8 million people, but
Right.
you still don't go much past 10 miles from where you live often.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And then, and that's the case with, a lot of people in the world. I mean, I think probably majority of the world lives like that, right? I mean, they don't venture very far because, you are very, so in that sense, I'm very lucky that
Yeah,
having been, able to travel this far and live in several different places,
yeah.
that's, uh, uh, I mean, that is indeed something that uh, I'm very thankful for.
Yeah. And like what was the key for you in terms of, I guess, like kind of adapting in a way that you became so comfortable either at Texas or to living in the South, it's where you've never really left.
I think part of it was, the age I came here. So I was at that age where, I wanted to make friends. Wanted to learn new things. If I was a little bit younger, I might have probably been a little more shocked, or if I was older, it would have been a transition would have been a little bit more difficult. But I think the age I was and the way my parents went about it, I mean, they had lived in the States before. My father went to college in the United States and, had friends already in this country. And I had met some of their friends as when they had come to visit us in India. And, my parents used to travel, not very often, but a couple of times they had come to the United States again. So uh, it never felt like it was a very foreign place because there were some familiar names and faces to start with. Um, and after that, we just, I got lucky with meeting folks who were welcoming and very nice. Not to say that there weren't some, some people who probably weren't thrilled that I was around,
Mm,
or my in the way I thought about the world. They didn't think it was the right way to think about the world. Again, you got to remember that I'd grown up in a place uh, that had not been Reaganified, and so my worldview on a lot of things that were happening at that time in terms of politics and America's involvement in places like Libya and other places, uh, were not in sync with a lot of what a lot of folks were saying and thinking.
mhm.
And I wasn't afraid to open my mouth and say what I was thinking. So at times it created some tensions.
Yeah, well, not being afraid of not being afraid of talking definitely can do that to you. Even for me and my family.
So, right.
So, and then so what you've settled into Mississippi. What is it about Mississippi that's like so kind of, I guess, obviously enchanted you?
Well, it's Oxford. I mean, and I don't think this would have happened anywhere else.
Mm,
And I say that because I've been in Oxford for almost 30 years now.
mm,
Oxford's a very unique place, or it was even more unique when I first came here. It's a small college town uh, with just a really fantastic world class bookstore and a culture of a literary culture and uh, this group of people that for a really small town were very are very forward thinking and outward looking, and so that was it just became a place where they took me in, and everybody was nice from the very beginning, and here we are. So
mm. So what is an ideal day for you? Not connected to the restaurant for you in Oxford.
yeah, I mean, ideal day was kind of staying sleeping late like I did today. Have coffee with my dog who's on that couch over there, looking out looking out the window, looking at the bird feeder. Uh, and then I put it around a little bit. I'll probably go to the square. Go to As I said, I'll go to Square Books. Kind of uh, look at books, not buy one. Look at them. Uh, grab a lunch somewhere, and then you know come back home. Make some tea, whatever. That kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Just yeah,
Okay. Well,
nothing.
now go on. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean nothing. Well, probably watch a little bit of television, or read the news and yell at it. That kind of stuff.
Well, I've been on this quest to like read a book about every state in the country, and I like try to be mindful of opportunities to learn about books from other states. So it sounds like Square Books' website I should go to, unless you have any books that you'd recommend about Mississippi, either fiction or
No,
nonfiction.
well, I mean, John Wright Thompson has a new book coming out, and I will tell you what it's called. That everybody should get their hands on. For people who don't know who Wright Thompson is, let me. I want to get the title right. So
Okay,
let's
I'm writing it
see.
down now.
All right, the book is called "The Barn:
Hmm.
The Secret History of Murder in Mississippi."
All right.
It comes out. Well, it doesn't come out till September, but people should pre-order that book.
Okay.
Uh, and it's a story about basically Mississippi and the Mississippi Delta, and how that place has defined a lot of uh, what has happened here in the state, and then sort of by extension what has happened in the South. Uh,
Hmm.
and Wright Thompson is a phenomenal writer. So
Hmm.
that's one that I would recommend everybody get their hands on. But of course, you've got Tom Franklin, you've got Michael Ferris Smith, you got Beth Ann Finley, you got uh, Amy Nezhukumatail. I mean, there are so many writers in Oxford right now that are putting out so much good work that you guys should, it's amazing.
Okay. I will. I'll have to replay this and get all those names down and start looking.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
so when did you start at Snack Bar?
Uh, from the very beginning, from 2009, we opened Snack Bar, and I moved. So I was working at a restaurant called City Grocery, which is owned by John Currens, and I'd worked with John Currens for a long time, and this space became available, and John and I had talked about doing a restaurant like this for a long time. So when the space became available, I moved over there and took over there.
Okay. And if I understand correctly, Snack Bar is like a southern French brasserie, and it has some of your influence as well, right?
Correct. Yes. Yes. I mean, the idea is, I mean, I always, during all my sort of, before I we came to the United States, we spent a little bit of time living in France, and then I've traveled back, and I really like that sort of French brasserie culture, where it's a neighborhood place where you go, you can relax, you can have uh, a, a big meal if you like, but you're not, you can have a coffee or a pastis and a couple of oysters and go on your way. Uh, I find that very sort of welcoming, and not being forced to uh, dress up and commit to a long evening if you don't want to, sort of aspect of a restaurant. And
Mhm.
so that's John is also a big fan of that, and so we decided that's what we wanted to be. But again, we are in Mississippi, so the ingredients would be southern. We would use fish from the Gulf of Mexico. We would source our produce from as close to us as possible. And then go from there. Um, and reference southern techniques and southern flavors. Um, and that's what we have done for the most part, and that's what I have done for the most part. But inevitably, whether this was consciously or unconsciously, I grew up with certain flavors,
Mhm.
and I like those flavors. And just just I feel like some ingredients need a certain spice because those are the spices that I had grown up eating with those particular ingredients. And so, like, yeah, I'll try it. Why not put cumin seeds with potatoes, because I like that combination, and if I like it, then everybody else should as well. So that's that's how it started, and
Yeah.
the response has been, we're coming up on our 15th anniversary on April 15th. So it's been, Oxford's been very receptive, and so we continue doing it.
Yeah. I mean, at first blush, it certainly seems like an unexpected pairing, but then, as you alluded to, like you referred to the foods of the South that look similar to the foods in the Indian cuisine, and then as I look
Yeah.
through your cookbook, there are so many recipes where it's just like, oh, that totally makes sense.
Right.
And I mean, it's thrilling to think about. And once I feel like I've started going down that rabbit hole, the more and more obvious it's like, oh my gosh, this is so wonderful. And then, it
Yeah.
sounds like that's what you've been doing.
Yeah, and again, I mean, the rabbit hole keeps getting deeper and deeper, and the more people I meet, and more things I discover, more flavors, more I learn about, the other immigrant communities in Mississippi, the more interesting it gets.
Yeah. Now, what when you started adding the I guess the Indian aspects to the food, was it immediately received positively? Did you have to kind of explain it? Like how did that? Because I think it seems to be one of the challenges with restaurants, especially if you want to do be unique, is you've got to like kind of educate people without making them feel like they're being educated.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the good thing about about Snack Bar, and the and the folks who come to Snack Bar, is that they had already sort of eaten the food that John and I cook at City Grocery
Mhm.
for a while, so they were not completely unfamiliar with these tangents I can go off on. Now
Mhm.
at City Grocery, those would be occasionally a special here and there, not a full
Mhm.
menu. And for the first couple of years, the menu was pretty straight down the middle, if you will. Uh, and so when the variations did start happening, it wasn't what are you doing, is like what's taking you so long.
Mhm.
Was more of that was more of a response than I don't understand what you're doing.
Mhm.
That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah. Do you have what's been some of the most popular dishes that you've done?
I I think okra chaat is
Mm,
probably one of those that people look forward to in the summertime. Uh, for some random reason, and this has nothing to do with the South or really anything else, but last 2 or 3 weeks, I decided to do a butter chicken just because I was craving it, and
uh-huh.
we had some really nice chicken, and I found myself wanting something very Indian, so I put butter chicken on the menu on a Wednesday, and people really love it, so I've left it on for the next 2 3 weeks, but it's only available on Wednesdays. I mean, again, that's
Mm,
neither Southern nor really anything else, but it's one of those dishes that people seem to enjoy, and I like. So um, that's been fun. But then anything, what works really well, and this is not just Oxford, but throughout the South, what people really like are sort of the summer. When spring and summer hit down here, we get so much really fantastic produce uh, that anything we can do with it is always a people are looking forward to it because they want to see uh, what we do next, or and the thing is, the good thing about Snack Bar is that we are in an old strip mall, so we have a big parking lot that turns into on in spring and summer. On Saturdays we have a nice big farmers market, and so on Saturday I'll walk through the farmers market and pick out a few things, and then sort of come in and play with those, and that stuff ends up on the menu for the evening. Uh, and that's always fun, and people always look forward to kind of because they've seen me at the market, so they want to then come in and see what it is that I'm doing with the things I picked up.
Wow, it's like
That's fun.
it's like in New York City being like Union Square Cafe and just going to the Union Square Market.
Yeah, but it's only, this is only in this, in the summer, and it's, it's a once a week deal, but still it's fun to pretend like I'm some kind of a, artist, or like being creative. I mean,
Yeah,
at that time of the year, I mean, the produce does all the talking on its own. You really, we're, anybody that tells you that chefs create stuff, or, I mean, we're just taking advantage of what's available to us, and
yeah,
not giving it credit.
yeah. So have you on the other side of the spectrum? Have you ever had any like experimental dishes that were like just utter catastrophes where you're just like,
Ah,
this was a
happens.
bad?
Yeah, it happens all the time. It happens all the time. So many years ago, and this is, this, the one particular. I mean, it's not really a dish; it's a condiment that I tried to make. I was I'd gotten into reading about the foods of the Spice Islands in Indonesia, and just kind of gotten excited about the history of ketchup and how it came. And I tried to say, okay, I think I want to make sort of like the original version, and I tried to make a banana ketchup, and it was probably the most god awful thing ever, uh, and I still remember how terrible it was, and so I've never gone back to trying to do that. But yeah, no, all the time. I mean, it's just because I think in my head it should work, doesn't always work. It's the good thing about the folks that come in to dine is they don't have, since I get to eat it and taste it first. Sometimes it gets edited out before the people have to suffer.
Yeah. So how big can I ask is the city of Oxford? Like, I mean, do you know roughly?
Yeah, so the city itself is maybe around 30,000 people, 28,000, something like that.
Hmm.
When you add the county,
Hmm.
and we're the county seat, and the university, then around 50,000 people.
Hmm.
That's about it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Have you embraced like I guess like the I mean from a New Yorker like one of the things you expect when you're talking to somebody like in the southeast is like really into like the college football. Is that
absolutely.
have you embraced that?
Uh, yes and no. I mean, I like college football a lot,
Uh-huh.
and being in Oxford, and being part of this community, there's no way around it, right?
Hmm.
Because we actually have a football season, right? I
Uh-huh.
mean,
Uh-huh.
and that's our busiest season in the restaurants and in town and
Really?
everything. But I went to college. I went to undergraduate school at the University of Kentucky, so I'm more of a college basketball person.
Okay.
And I think college basketball is the best sport around. But I love football Saturdays, and that whole atmosphere, and the fans getting uh, really excited about coming to a game and all that. The whole pageantry that goes with it. Down here, there's nothing quite like it. I mean, people should come experience it.
Yeah, I would love to. That would be great. Maybe you should do like another book should be like, tailgating from
It's
Vish.
already been done. John Kearns has a great book out there. It's called Tailgate.
Oh.
Unfortunately, it came out right in the middle, as we were going through all the COVID sufferings. So it there was not a big book tour or anything that came with it. But people should get their hands on it. It's one of my favorite. It's one of those books that has recipes that are really approachable, and they're fun, and
Mhm.
it's I mean, it's the book about tailgating, so lots of fun snacks and stuff like that, which you can then serve at parties and things like that. So it's a fun book.
Yeah, wow. Well, I'd say I was looking through your book and some of the things that like jumped out at me because I married into a Taiwanese family, so there were things like you have like a vegetable congee
Right.
and like your grown up stir fried rice,
Yeah.
which were great, and I love the idea of the I saw the grits upma is
Hmm.
another thing. The American Tributaries has a second arm, which is about encouraging travel, so student
Right.
travel. So we've been South Carolina as our first destination. So I kind of got very seriously into grits with that connection. So I've enjoyed dallying in
Well, thank you. Yeah.
it. But
I think everybody should have grits. Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, corn is America's grain, right?
yeah.
So yeah.
but I found the also though that I told somebody once that I put some avocado in my grits, and that seemed to be kind of like a transgression against grits. Um, but I was like, I'm showing
Hey,
respect to this and kind of trying to infuse it with things that I love to, you
exactly.
know,
Yeah, I think that's the way to go.
yeah. So, do you drink wine as well?
I do.
And do you have any particular wines that you like, either on your own or with your foods?
Wow. Well, okay. Let's. I'm not an aficionado, right? I like wine,
Mm.
and I enjoy, having a nice glass or two or three,
Ah.
sometimes, of wine. Um, Of late, I've been really into a couple of producers out of Napa. Mathiasen
Hmm.
is one, and a lot of people will probably will know about Mathiasen. The other one is Newfound Wine,
Hmm.
a young couple making wine. Audra and Matthew, a really awesome wine, and they are, you think of Napa and everybody thinks sort of the big, Napa Cabernets and stuff like that. And these guys are making Grenache and doing it so well. So if you can get your hands on either in Mathiasen, of course, everything they do is great. And then the Grenache varietals that Newfound Wines are working with, those are awesome.
Yeah. It's Are you familiar at all with Masacan?
A little bit, not. I
Okay.
mean, again, yeah,
Those wines are very interesting and
yeah,
different too. Go really well. Dan Petrosky is the guy behind that, and he's
yeah.
from Brooklyn originally.
hmm
So
That name I know. So
okay,
yeah,
all right, yeah, yeah. And then for the oysters, to me, a recent revelation in the last few years is how well they go with Scotch.
I have not tried that.
Oh
So
my
we'll
gosh.
work. Yeah. Well, I'm off. I'm off tonight, so that might be.
So this was a friend of mine, because I don't know if it came up before, but I work in wine and spirits distribution,
Okay.
and one of my clients introduced me to, like, you take the oyster, and the way he did it was he just did like use eyedropper of like a good peaty scotch, and
Okay.
you can do like 3 or 4 drops right into the oyster
hmm
and then slurp it, and the peatiness of the scotch with the brininess of the oyster is just, it's heavenly.
Okay. Yeah,
It's
I will get on that this evening.
the have you seen the Ratatouille? I assume.
Yes.
So that to me is like one of those, like 1+1 = 3 things, where it's like
Yeah.
each
Yeah.
idea is exciting, but you put them together and it's fireworks.
All right. Okay. And if this works, I'm taking 100% credit for it.
Yeah,
It's like,
please do. Like, well, see, this is part of the American tributaries
all right.
connections,
I
is
will
like
I will
taking
totally
ideas.
appropriate this idea if it.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, please do. So, have there any kind of like, I guess one of my wife and I just finished watching The Bear, and I'm sure you get asked about this. Does that show a reflective, at least, of parts of what it's like to be in a kitchen?
I have no idea. I haven't seen a single episode.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, how about then I'll approach this a different way. I was a lawyer for 8 years, and
hmm
I've seen law shows. And I
Yeah.
think when you see a law show, it's like, okay, this is something that could happen, but your entire day is not that. Most of
Right.
your day is very tedious. Most of your day is just more droning, and you'd never want anybody recording it. So, how much of your day is like the exciting things that people think of a chef doing, and how much of it is more mundane, I guess?
I, it depends on the day, right? I mean, because some days are different than others. I mean,
Mm,
there are times when it's all tedious work because it
hmm.
has to be done. And then there are days when you're being creative and everything's sort of firing on all cylinders, and you know, people are bringing new ideas and new flavors to you, and so it just depends. But all in all, in general, I mean, it's hard work. I mean, it is, it's long hours, it's hard work. You're on your feet. I mean, it's the glamour part of it is maybe 5% of all the work that you do all year long.
Mm. Okay. And then I guess, when did you feel like in your professional, I guess, career arc, that you like knew that this was for you? Was it at the very beginning, or was there a point where you're working one night and just things were humming and you were like, this is it?
No, it took about 3 years. And again, as I said, I came into cooking as out of desperation. I didn't know what to do, but I needed a job to pay bills. And then so I was sort of, and it was that for, it's like I got to go to work and I got to pay my bills and I got to support my habit and whatever else I got to do. But then I realized that I really enjoyed being with those people that I was working with. And again, I was very fortunate. I mean, this doesn't happen very often, so it's not very typical. But I fell in with a group of folks who were all about the same age. We were all in a college town. We were all sort of, every one of us had a college degree, but we're
Mm,
all working the line at a restaurant. And having lots of banter about things happening in the world and listening to music in the kitchen and and having fun. And it was hard work, but we were as a group, as a group of 4 or 5 of us, we were having fun. And so it became, I started enjoying going to work, right, looking forward to it, and then and spending time with those guys afterwards. And so that was, that happened, and I could have walked into a kitchen where things were hostile and people yelled at each other and things were thrown around, and it might have been a completely different experience, and I might
mm,
have left. But that didn't happen for me. And so a couple of years in, after hanging out with these folks and learning, and it's like, oh, I really enjoy this. I like coming here. Like coming into this building. I enjoy this work. I enjoy uh, seeing these people that we're feeding out. Because again, I realize Oxford's a very small town. So if you go to the grocery store, you're going to see folks that were in your dining room, the night before, and they might say something, and they had seen you, and they'll say hello, and uh, so it became more of a community thing, and more of a, I, this feeling that, hey, people enjoy what I do, and I enjoy
mm,
what I'm doing as well.
mm.
So yeah, it took a couple of years, but yeah, then it clicked that, yeah, this is what I wanted to do.
Okay. Well, what kind of music are you playing in the kitchen?
I mean, nowadays I'm not playing anything. Nowadays the kids are playing stuff, and a lot of it I don't recognize. So,
Right.
but so what? It's
Yeah.
it's anywhere from, we've got a couple of folks that are really into this whatever K-pop or whatever it is, and
Uh,
from that, and some folks have just now discovered Snoop Dogg, so it's like,
mhm.
yep, see, yeah, there you go. So.
And what were you playing in the kitchen at that time?
We had, lots of, there were the Ramones and the Rolling Stones, uh, stuff like that.
Uh,
Yeah.
okay. So I mean, running a kitchen and everything is already extremely time consuming, as you said. So how did you? Like, where was the idea for the cookbook, and how did you fit a cookbook into your already busy life?
I, well, the idea of the cookbook, I mean, it was at the back of my head, and again, it's not, and this is. uh, Mostly because I come from a very academic family, right? So I'm the least educated person in my entire family. Everybody's got at least two master's degree, if not more, and they all do things that are very literary, and they go to art gallery openings, and my dad writes poetry, and I have an uncle who's a very successful a novelist, and that sort of. So there was always this. I always grew up around folks who were either reading a lot or, doing some dabbling in some sort of writing. And then I, of course, came to Oxford, which is a town full of folks that, write really well. And, and that's all that. And then John wrote his first cookbook and then his second cookbook. And so you know what? I felt like I had a story to tell. I thought it was, you know, uh, interesting. And I finally had, after working for so many years, I felt like I had enough of a collection of recipes that made sense. And for a very long time, I've been talking about, the connections, how I made the connections between the place I grew up in and the place I now call home. Uh, and then, of course, our political climate was such that it felt really important uh, that immigrants have a voice. And so I wanted to tell that story, and then so I put a proposal together with help from a friend, and sent it in. And David Black, who's my agent, he's in Brooklyn. He loved it and shopped it, and Norton stepped up, and they liked it, and that's how that came about.
That's great. To me, I think what I've loved about food, and even like with what I do with like wine and spirits, is there's the connections that happen across the table, and there's also the connections between the diners and like where the food comes from and how the food gets to where you are,
Right.
and then even like what you're talking about is like even the ideation of what you're making can come from all over. And I think
Right.
that to me is the beautiful thing. And it sounds like, I mean, you had said before, I mean, I think that it's a beautiful thing that you did. And I think that what's interesting is obviously that added element of you being from down in Oxford, Mississippi, which
Hmm.
is an unexpected twist on already an unexpected twist. Um, and I think, like for me, I think in New York, we get a very, there's a very, we all live in echo chambers. We all live in like our own little idea silos.
Hmm.
And I think that what your book did is it kind of breaks so many of those different silos, and echo chambers at the same time.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, and again, I mean, I didn't intend to do that, but it was just, a lot of these things were in my head, and I wanted to tell stories, and the only way I know how to tell stories is through food, and it made sense. And I'm glad it turned out the way it did. I'm really proud of the work we did with it.
Yeah. So you already, and I think you've already kind of answered this question. I think in many respects, but like, is there anything that you'd want to say? I guess you feel like things about like, I mean, Mississippi or the South that you think are misunderstood by people outside, like for somebody from New York getting what we see in the news and in whatever else.
Right. No, yes, yes. I mean, and all the world. I mean, this is not uniquely a problem for the South. It's also a problem, for places like New York, where mostly and we're responsible for a lot of the notions that exist. But then we also have to, whether it's New York or Mississippi or Iowa or whatever it is, and,
Yeah.
and I'll address Mississippi in particular because there's this notion that we are a certain way, that we're backwards, and and to a lot of extent, a lot of those things are true. Uh, but what doesn't get noticed is all the really fun, progressive, creating things that are coming out of Mississippi, right? Nobody wants to. That doesn't sell copy,
Right.
right? For some reason, uh, that doesn't sell copy, so nobody wants to talk about that. And what then ends up happening is uh, the folks who are doing the good work have to work even harder than they are to get noticed.
Mm,
Uh, and then the narrative is, oh, you're so different from rest, but yes, you may be different, but you are still part of Mississippi, right?
yeah.
And that's and people need to realize that it's not just one way or the other, that two things can coexist. uh, that Mississippi can be backwards, and we can elect leaders who are essentially killing the state and are dumb as bricks because we don't know any better. We But at the same time, we also have folks that are doing some world class work, whether it be literature or art or music, or even be really progressive politically, and doing things within communities that need a voice, and that voice comes you know uh, from other folks outside taking notice. And the only way that would happen is if they came here, right, to
Right.
see what was going on.
Right.
And that's the problem. The media, which and again, I mean, not say media because I mean, what is media now? I think it's maybe two companies controlling everything, right?
Yeah.
So uh, the way we get our information is so limited, and so formulaic now, that you know unless somebody really decides to break the mold and then go out there and and go look for themselves, it's really hard to get the other stories out,
Yeah.
and
Well,
that's unfortunate. Yeah,
I hope this
that's
podcast can do that part.
right. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, but I also, to me, I think that part of it is also going. I think even seeing the other sides of, I think, understanding, I think that, like, to use a wine term, like every area has its terroir, and
correct.
people reflect their setting.
Hmm.
So if you're in New York, there's a certain setting, and New York has its, its own rash problem, its own bureaucratic inefficiencies, and
Hmm.
its own hypocrisies, and its
Yep.
own callous businessmen. Like, it's everywhere. But there was this comedian that made this was talking to people who think New Yorkers are too rushed and too rude, and it was interesting because it's such a simple such a simple example, but it really makes sense. So, like, even the idea of, like, being rude or polite can be very different in the context. So, like, in New
Right.
York, if you go to the pizza counter and you order a slice and you start chit-chatting with the guy, that's not necessarily polite, because that guy has work to do. He might have a
Right.
line of people behind you, and while
Right.
you're distracting him with stupid with conversation that is intended to be friendly and polite, you're actually disrupting his business, and you're being rude to everybody behind you who wants to get their food.
Right.
But if you're in the same exact context, I'm sure if you're in Oxford, there's more opportunity to be able to chit chat, and if you didn't
Sure.
talk, it might be considered rude. So it's the same
Exactly.
behavior, but the
All right.
context dictates how you're going to be. And I think, to me, there is. I don't know if we've become, like, maybe we think we know more than we do, but one of the mantras I'm trying to be is more humble, because you shouldn't immediately knee jerk react to anything
Exactly.
because you
And
don't
learn,
understand the
yeah,
context.
because you have to, yeah, the context is everything, right? I mean, you have to understand why it is that people do something. And also, and what happens is, and I'll give you this, because I used to come to New York, before I knew a lot of folks who lived in New York. Now I know people that live in neighborhoods, and I go stay with them.
Hmm.
And that New York is very different, right? When you're in somebody's neighborhood and they go to the neighborhood store, and the guy knows your name, and hey, hey Melissa, how are you doing? What do you need?
Yeah.
That conversation versus me going to, you know, um, whatever deli, and wanting a New York experience are completely two different New York experiences, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and that's the same here. If you come in to Mississippi and give us a chance, right? Give us a chance to show us what we are, and
Hmm.
not just take the sort of the superficial. Spend a couple of days in the town, get to know the people, and see what happens, right?
Hmm.
That's a whole different experience, and you learn a lot more. That doesn't mean the other part doesn't exist. It's
Hmm.
there, and some of it, some of New York is rude. I mean, that's not, kid
No, yeah,
ourselves.
for sure.
Yeah,
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 yeah, no, for
right.
sure.
uh, but that's not all New York is, and Mississippi is backwards, and Mississippi can be racist, but that's not what all Mississippi is, right? And that's, you have to learn, to understand and balance that, and then by interacting, one hopes that we change, slowly change the dynamics of how interactions happen.
Yeah. The term that I like to refer to is saying, like, I just want to create, like, cognitive dissonance. Like, you like, just kind of catch yourself before you decide something,
Right.
realizing that what you see on the news isn't quite what's the reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not the full reality anyway,
No,
right?
it's a yeah, it could be true, but that's only
Sure.
one sliver of what's true. I
Right.
mean, like, I think I was in Biloxi for, like, a brief minute, or I'm not sure. I think we watched, but I have not been to Mississippi really ever. So I think, to me, one of my lifetime goals has been, I really do want to kind of travel and be in all 50 states
Right.
and get to know the country, because it's just so vast and there's so many different aspects
Hmm.
to it.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. And in many places, you'll be surprises, like, you didn't realize that this would exist in a place, right?
Yeah.
And then you're like, or didn't realize this didn't exist. I mean, how can you be in a place where you these things that we are in America, these things should happen. People should have, you know clean drinking water, but they don't. How is that possible in this country? But that's the other reality of this, uh, this whole, you know life that we live, or whatever it is, that we should, be all collectively concerned about when things are not going right,
Yeah,
because it
and
reflects on all of us.
yeah, yeah, and try to fix it. So, do you have other? Are you do you have like other restaurants outside of the Oxford area, or what's your the scope of your responsibilities?
So I mean, I know I live and work in Oxford,
Hmm.
part of the City Grocery Restaurant Group. So we have City Grocery, Big Bad Breakfast, Booray,
Hmm.
and Snack Bar. And I spend majority of my time at Snack Bar,
Okay.
with with you know and because everybody we have really good staff in place everywhere else. We've been very fortunate. I mean, for a while it was rough,
Hmm.
but we've managed. Again, that's the beauty of being in a small town. We have been able to maintain and retain. Folks came back after all the troubles that we had. And
Hmm.
um, so yeah, I spend most of my time at Snack Bar, and then pop in if needed to the other places.
And did you go on a long like book tour with
I did. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I did. It was fun. It was year before last,
Hmm.
and it was fantastic. One, because it came sort of at the end of what had been, for most of us in this business, and then a lot of other folks, really really trying times. We had all sort of been cooped up and didn't know what was going to happen. Um, and so it was nice to get out, nice to be able to travel, and it was great to see friends. It's great to get out there. I mean, it was one of those. The timing probably couldn't have been any better. As because people were ready to get out and eat, and so and it was nice to go see friends who wanted to host and do something different, and their staffs were ready to do something different. So it became sort of a this reunion tour that was a lot of fun.
Great. How many different cities did you get to? I mean, if it roughly.
Yeah, maybe about, all told, around 28 or so.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And all over, was it largely in the southeast? Was it all over the country?
Some mostly. So I started off in the southeast, mostly in the southeast, and then Texas, and then
Mhm.
New York, D.C.,
Okay.
and of all the random places in the world, Michigan.
Okay. Ah.
Yeah, which
It,
was which was probably the best stop of them all, in a small town in. Wow, I should remember the name of this town, but I'll think of it in just a second. There's a small town on the lake up northern Michigan,
hmm.
that has a little book festival.
Hmm.
And why can't I think of Harbor Harbor Springs, Michigan. Um, and it's on the lake, and uh, it's a small town. I think 800 permanent residents. Of course, in the summer it swells because people have lake homes, and they all come up. And so this is in September, sort of at the tail end of their big season. So most people are gone. So there were about 1,100 people or 1,200 people in town at that time. They bring in about 40 authors, and it is they treat them like VIPs. The whole town is bought, and this is the town's event. Um, I was there for 3 days. They put you up in these houses that are empty because people are like, well, we're not here, so they've bought into this as well, and it's a fantastic event. I mean, I've never seen anything like it, and I resisted. I kept telling my publishers, like, why do you want me to go to Michigan? It's like, this doesn't make any sense. You know, why don't I go to Miami instead, or some other place where I have connections, and they're like, no, 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 trust us, you want to go here. And I'm so glad that I did,
Hmm.
because I met some really wonderful people, and I've never seen a book event like this where the whole town has bought in. I mean, this is the town's event. To just kind of tell you how great it was. So the keynote speaker is a lady who is a historian who writes sort of about you know uh, ancient Egypt or something like that, and sort of that kind of, uh, and she was the keynote speaker, and they had the keynote speech in the town, the school auditorium, and it was packed, standing room only, to listen to a woman talk about history, right? How amazing is that?
Yeah. Fantastic. Wow.
Yeah.
And where did you, when you were in New York, what bookstore did you go to? Do you remember?
We did. I didn't go to a bookstore. We
Uh,
did a thing at what's it called? Chelsea Market upstairs.
oh, yeah, yeah, okay.
Chelsea. What is it? Yeah, is it Chelsea Pier? Chelsea Market
Chelsea
upstairs,
Market.
where where they have a space upstairs,
Hmm.
and it was sort of in conjunction with the Museum of Food,
Hmm.
MoFad,
Okay, yeah.
right? Food and drink. So they, they kind of put it on, and so we had a nice crowd, and of course, again, it was one of those things where the guys from Tamaka are friends,
Hmm.
and they're like, "Hey, you're coming to town. Let us host." And so people haven't been able, couldn't get reservations at the restaurants. Decided they're all going to come out just because they were doing the snacks
Hmm.
to this event. So I had a nice nice crowd thanks to them.
Well, as we're talking right now, one of the things that hits me is that in New York City, one of the ways you learn new neighborhoods is you get lured by a restaurant where it's like, oh wait, let's go
Right.
to this restaurant. Well, I'm realizing what we're doing here is I feel like I am definitely more curious about like going to Oxford, and I think going to Snack Bar is like the
Yeah.
anchor visit to to like an extended visit to Oxford and
Yeah, well,
Mississippi.
Snack Bar's great, but there are a lot more places, besides Snack Bar that you should come check out. And yeah, I mean, yes, we definitely want you and everybody else that comes through Oxford to come through Snack Bar. But I would be more than happy to make a list of places they should visit and eat at and go see while they're here.
Okay, and the bookstore.
The bookstore, you have to go. Even if you don't go to any of the restaurants, you got to go to the bookstore, because there are
I mean,
very few like it left. I mean,
really,
a real true bookstore that's independently owned and operated. It's fantastic.
yeah, yeah. I love going to local bookstores. I also love like going to local like grocery stores because I think you can learn
Yeah,
a lot by
about
what's
people.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So well, I know we're starting to approach the hour mark, so we should probably wrap up. But can I ask, like, before we finish, like, what gives you hope at the end of the day?
I think conversations like these, right? I mean, just of random people that you haven't really met that reach out and then say, "Hey, let's talk." I think that's hopeful in this day and age. Um, I mean, we are in a really tough place in the world right now. I mean, things that are happening around us that it just boggles the mind that in 2024, people would be acting the way they are, and what you would think are really sensible people would know better, but they, for some reason, uh, they're not, and so I'm hopeful uh, that maybe we come to our senses and act like civilized human beings that we are. Maybe we come together, in small ways like this, and exchange ideas and talk about things and talk things through, which might be naive on my part to think that would be of much help, but I think it's more helpful than not talking, and then that's the hope. I mean, again, we're I'm old enough to remember where talking to folks was a very easy thing to do. I mean, you didn't agree on a lot of things, but you could still be civil and have a drink and visit people in their homes, and uh, we've somehow had this big chasm between us now that I hope we can bridge.
Yeah. Well, I think this is. I think the one of the burdens for our generation is coping with technology, and
Yeah,
it gives a lot of access, but also I think it can reinforce a lot of
yeah.
feelings about things. And
Right. But I mean, again, technology could be one of those things that, hopefully will create bridges that didn't exist in places, right? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
because you can now really easily communicate, from across the globe. So,
yeah. And I think I refer to this podcast as like really my anchor of hope because this conversation and everyone that I've had before just it really kind of steals my belief in I think people in general. And I think that
mhm.
when you think about this country, our founding structural document, the Constitution starts with "We the people," and I think
Right.
ultimately it's us that have to have these small conversations to
Absolutely.
start then getting other people to see it,
Yeah.
imitate it, but also then to kind of, I think, get the politicians we deserve across the spectrum that
Right.
are able to disagree with civility and
Yeah.
still be effective in kind of leading us forward, in starts and stops. It's messy. Humanity is messy.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
I think we can continue going forward in a positive way.
100%.
And
And
I appreciate
I believe in sort of that, throwing a rock in the pond sort of
Yeah.
thing, right? You start with where the rock drops. That's you. That's your local community, and then you kind of work your way out, in the
Yeah.
concentric rings. And hopefully that's what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, I think you're doing great stuff. And for everybody, again, I am from here. It's really delicious, mouth-watering book, and once you start flipping through the pages, you won't stop, and you will, of course, buy it. And is there? Do you have your own website or anything?
Yeah, it is www.kissmybot.com.
So KISS my BHATT.
Yes.
Is that it? Okay? Great. All right. Well, Vishwas, thank you so very much for
Thanks,
being
Michael.
open to this conversation. It's been
Not
such
at
a
all, Mike. That
pleasure.
was fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a lot of fun. And
Thank you.
from what I understand, we have a connection at Norton.
Oh, with Erin. Through Erin?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Do you
so
know her as well?
I know of her, and I don't know her
Okay.
very well, but that's. I mean, it's a small world, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
another connection that we can make, and when we start, that's the thing. When we start looking, there'll be connections in places you didn't realize you had them.
Yeah. So shout out to Erin Lovett. She's also on the
Yeah.
board of American Tributary. So
Hey.
she's
All
also
right.
a great friend. So thank you. And thank you to all the listeners and viewers out there. May you go out and explore our country with unconditional curiosity, respect, compassion, and humility. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.